Greetings, everyone. I'm Simon Perkowski. Today I'm excited to welcome scientist, author, and speaker, Dr. Paul Zak. In 2004, his lab discovered that oxytocin, aka the moral molecule, allows us to determine who to trust. His work on oxytocin and relationships has earned him the nickname Dr. Love. And his book, The Moral Molecule, The Source of Love and Prosperity, was a finalist for the Wellcome Trust Book Prize. Dr. Zak was featured in a Fast Company article related to the role of social networking in oxytocin release, was named one of Wired Magazine's 10 Sexiest Geeks, and his TED Talk has gained over 1 million views. He is credited with the first published use of the term neuroeconomics, and is the founding director of the Center of Neuroeconomic Studies at Claremont Graduate University. Today he's going to talk about how to measure organizational trust, policies that will increase trust, and how this affects organizations' goals. Please join me in welcoming Paul.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, and everybody watching in the live stream. Very happy to be here, and I want to be both useful and slightly entertaining. So that's my goal. So I helped start this field called neuroeconomics. I'll tell you a little about that. We want to now penetrate neuroscience into management and culture. So that's what we're going to focus on primarily today. I don't know any human resources. I know a lot of humans. I like that you don't have, I think HR is just the worst word ever. So yes, the people ops are much better. Human development, better. So let's talk about how to design cultures for high engagement, high performance. That's the stuff we've been doing for 5 or 6 years, and I will tell you about. So here's an analogy. You have friends, I presume. Your friends invite you for dinner. Finish dinner, Eric finishes dinner, and he says, oh, it was really great. Here's $20 for the... It'll be weird, right? Why would you pay someone when they invited you to do something that was enjoyable, presumably for them and for you? So once we understand work as not something that is, in econo-speak, providing disutility, something that can be actually very enjoyable and fulfilling, then why are we incentivizing people with money for every little task they do? Right? Again, I think many tech companies, Google in particular, is an exception to this, but still we're thinking about, oh, what this person really wants is to somehow get recognized with more money, right? In which the process of doing things often is super interesting. So when I started working in neuroeconomics about 12 years ago, before there was a term for it, I wanted to take a very humble view and just ask, instead of saying you're irrational or you're selfish, why not just measure what your brain's doing while you're making decisions? Maybe they involve money, maybe they don't. And then from that, build a foundation for decision making that's based on the brain and not based on some philosophical tradition about stuff is everything in the world for me. I like stuff, but there are lots of other things I like besides stuff, right? So why am I so focused in economics on just getting more stuff? Because it's measurable. So for management, we did the same thing. Let's get rid of all the stuff you learned at MBA school or whatever, and just start out with thinking about people at work as volunteers. Right? Essentially, you are all volunteers. You're choosing to be here. You have a lot of skills, and you can take those skills and go somewhere else with them. So if I think about creating a culture where volunteers love to show up, they're super engaged, they're challenged, they're recognized, what kind of culture would that be? Right? So that was my starting point for what I'm calling neuromanagement. How do we actually just start from that idea? Right? Now, we have a lot of knowledge in social neuroscience about why people voluntarily come together to work on any kind of project. So let's take that knowledge and then try to build a foundation using neuroscience to understand cultures and people who are choosing to work together on projects in cultures. So that's where we're going. I'm trying to be very, very practical. I guess my confession is, not an engineer, but son of an engineer. So we take a very engineering approach to neuroscience. We're going to run experiments, then use that data to create a solution. And that solution could be, as you'll see, could be a survey, could be a piece of software. So we want to really make this solution focused. Otherwise, it's interesting and fun, but you know, not valuable, I think. Okay, so now we have a decision point. I need to give you 5 minutes of the background, some of the experiments that have preceded all this work. And either I can do that for 5 minutes, show you lots of tables and graphs, or we can have the buttery voice of Morgan Friedman tell us about it. Me or Morgan? Let's do Morgan, just for fun. I don't know why. So that was from Morgan Freeman's show Through the Wormhole, and obviously a little more dramatic than the experiments we were in the laboratory, but that was preceded by a dozen years of experiments in which we designed tasks that we thought would induce the brain to make oxytocin, this molecule that makes us care about others. And we've shown both in field studies and laboratory studies that, in fact, almost everybody has the appropriate response. And essentially, it's one of the golden rule. So unnice to Eric, his brain makes oxytocin, it motivates him to reciprocate kind with kind. Now, there's an anti-golden rule. We could talk about that some other time. If you're bad to me, I'm going to be really bad to you, and that's also a way we can play. So we've done this lots of places. This is a picture of me with my tribe in Papua New Guinea. So I did an experiment in the rainforests of Papua New Guinea. If you guys know about Papua New Guinea, you know there are 800 distinct languages in this little volcanic island. It's like going back in the Stone Age, no running water, no electricity, no bathrooms. It's really, really primitive. And even these guys, in an ecologically valid setting, induce oxytocin release when they engage in rituals. So it seems to be a human universal. So as we began studying this, we spent a lot of time understanding what inhibits the release of oxytocin, what promotes it, so we could really understand how this brain system allows us to navigate through the sea of strangers in which we live. And one of those places that we live with other strangers is at work. And so as we started thinking about how do we apply this to understand why some organizations reach high performance and others don't perform very well at all, started thinking of kind of a simple model that we could use in neuroscience to understand that, which I call the POP model. Right? So POP stands for people, organization, and purpose. So people is hiring. Right? So we could do a whole another day on hiring. Not going to talk about it today. Okay? So in short, you know the right thing to do, which is hire smart people for the right cultural fit. What we do want to talk about is organization. So I can take great people, put them in a really crappy culture, and they're not going to perform well, right? Or I can have a great culture and hire the wrong people, they're not going to perform well. Okay, so this is really going to focus on this talk on organization and on purpose, and I'll come back to purpose at the end. So I want to push on 2 of those 3 levers today, see what we get out of it. So here's the kind of model we've come from the dozen years of studies. And I should say, these studies include field studies at for-profits. So come in, take blood, measure neurologic activity a variety of ways from people at work. And so not only does this work in the laboratory, it works in the field. So we identified 8 classes of policies that you can push on in your organization that can raise trust. Somehow, magically, those 8 classes of policies have an easy-to-remember acronym, oxytocin. I don't know how that worked. So if I push on these oxytocin factors, 1 or more of them, I'm going to get more trust. The science predicts that when I have trust combined with a sense of purpose, what I call transcendent purpose, I'll talk about that in a minute, then I get more engagement at work from these volunteer employees, greater customer service, and an outcome of that is that I just dig it. It's fun now. Like, there's still some drag parts of work, but by and large, I love what we do. I love the people I work with, and I'm just knocking it out of the park all the time, right? So when I have high performance, then I generate this feedback loop, which is now it's more fun to come to work because we're knocking it out of the park a lot of the days, right? Maybe not every day, but a lot of times. Man, we had a home run yesterday. That was awesome, right? So how do I create that environment in which, again, even if I didn't pay you, you still want to show up? So I'm going to go through each of those oxytocin factors in some detail. I mean, not too much detail because I have an hour. Give you an example of a company that's been doing this very well. And at the end, talk about how that relates to outcome measures based on a sample of about 5,000 employees from companies around the globe. Okay, so here are the 8 factors. Okay, so once you have those factors, how do you manage that? Right? Second confession of the talk. As you guys know, from that nice video from Morgan Freeman. I am a brilliant scientist. I think of everything to study. No, I don't know what I'm doing half the time, like you guys. I'm just trying to figure it out as I go, right? So I actually had an organization come to me some years ago and say, hey, we think trust is really important. Could you help us understand trust in our organization? And I said, oh yeah, I'd be happy to come. I'll bring my needles and my centrifuges and dry ice. And like, oh no, that's a good idea. They said, is there some other way you can do that? And I started thinking, oh yeah, we know a lot about this brain system that allows us to trust other people quite rapidly. Oxytocin release happens in a second or two after you interact with somebody, if it's a positive interaction. So we know a lot about that system. How do we turn that down into a tool? So we developed this survey we call O-Factor, which allows us to quantify trust within an organization and these 8 classes of factors that produce it. That tool also allows us to measure things like joy at work. Okay, so we're going to use that tool to then seek to measure what we want to manage. That makes sense? Okay, so let me go through these again briefly, and we'll have plenty of time for questions too. Okay, so the first is ovation. All right, so this means recognizing excellence. Right? So someone in the room is going to think, gosh, like, I don't know, day one in business school at Stanford, we talked about like recognizing people. That's not new. Oh, no, here's where the neuroscience comes in. The neuroscience has very specific predictions on how to get the most out of recognition. In particular, recognition that is personal, that is tangible, that happens close in time when the goal is met or exceeded, no more than a week after it happens. That's public, that's unexpected. So, you guys don't have this, but these businesses that have like Employee of the Month parking place, you know, okay, I guess, but you know, eventually everyone gets it, right? Kind of move it around, right? But instead, for Eric, who I know loves coffee, his team just nailed this project. They were working for 3 months, killed it, and then we come to our all hands meeting on Monday, and I bring him a great gift basket of really great coffee and a nice mug, and he's like, because I know him, right? And I'm invested in him. So what happens during ovations is that not only do we recognize the team for doing well, you have an opportunity for a debrief, right? So, Eric, you guys just killed it. Tell us about the project. What happened? What went right? What went wrong? Say, oh, you know what? We were working on this, and we thought we were going to do this, but then we found out that stuff didn't work. So then we pivoted, and we did this, and then 3 days before it was done, the servers crashed, and then we had to find the backups, and then Tori worked super late, and she worked till midnight, and she saved all the data, and then we got the project done on time. Okay, so we just got a chance to do a debrief, not only what goes right, but what happens when things go wrong, right? So innovation is both recognizing the individual and the team, but also identifying what do we do? What's best practice, right? Let's just discover best practice. It also creates aspirations, right? So Barbara's team would like to be recognized, right? So when her project comes up, yeah, saying, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, right? Everyone was clapping for Eric's team and it was great. So you're building in this culture that says, we recognize you. We recognize that you are working very hard. We recognize you're putting your heart and soul into this, and we want to recognize that it's valuable. We recognize it as a group that it's valuable, and we want to use the implications of neuroscience to get the biggest neurologic impact and therefore the biggest behavioral impact. So this, and there's lots behind this I'm not going to talk about, but this sets up pathways in the brain that essentially make you crave that, right? I want to be recognized. I'm working hard. Even the introverts like me, we want to be recognized occasionally, right? So yeah, you were great. That's awesome. Number 2 is expectation. This is designing challenges at work. You guys know a lot about this. Oh, by the way, I'm putting the data up. So the values here are how much of each of these factors, how much they explain organizational trust. All those factors are not independent, right? There's some overlap, so they sum to more than one because of that. So expectation explains 72% of organizational trust. So again, from the science, if I want to create challenges at work, those challenges have to enable what psychologists call challenge stress. I want to put you in a situation where you know what you need to do, you know when it's going to be over, you have very clear goals, that the outcomes are concrete. What I don't want to do is move you into a chronic stress state, right? So chronic stress, we know, inhibits the release of oxytocin, puts you in survival mode. Now I pull inward. I'm just trying to get through the next 10 minutes. Right? I'm not worried about organizing my team, focus. I want to get you in challenge stress, like when I went skydiving. So if you guys have ever done this, you are super focused, particularly the first time, right? The instructor says you need to do these three things to get out of the plane safely and get in position so we don't tumble out and, like, okay, I know those three things. I'm saying it over and over. Okay, do this, arch your back. Oh, okay, I got it. So what you didn't see is that I had a graduate student who was also a skydive instructor with me, and before we jumped, he gave me cognitive tests, and I couldn't do them at all. On the ground, I was cool. And when I actually came back down, I was fine. So I was highly focused on tasks. So when I designed challenges, these concrete, difficult but achievable challenges, your brain gets rid of distractions, right? You're focused on tasks. I'm not watching cat videos. I'm not answering unimportant emails. Right? I have a reason to come together. So for this oxytocin trust system to work, I need a reason to marshal those social resources. So moderate stress, this challenge stress, promotes the release of oxytocin. I need to depend on Simon. He's part of my team. I have no choice. Our project's due in 2 weeks. I need his input. I got to engage with him. And he's going to do an important part of that. If I can't engage with him, the project's not going to work out right. So I have a real incentive to do that. Okay? Now, what happens when I finish the project? Go back to step one. Now we have an ovation. Right? So from the neuroscience, it's very important that after I put you under challenge stress, that you have a refractory period. Right? So you probably know this, but the brain is very much like a muscle. It gets fatigued. The neurons actually get fatigued. So when you've been going, what I want to do is when you finish the project on Monday, not say, here's the next giant thing you got to do. Monday, let's celebrate. Let's have cake. Let's take half a day off and go to what's over here, Great America, hang out. Right? I'm going to buy you tickets to that. Let's have this down period. Catch up an email. Go home at a regular time. Then maybe Wednesday or Thursday or next Monday, I'm going to give you a big new project to start working on. Right? So we need a little bit of downtime just to figure out what we did. Again, internally debrief, maybe debrief on paper, share that information, and then move on to the next big challenge. So it can't just be challenge. Okay. Third component is called yield. Expands 57% organizational trust. So this is something I think Google does very well as well. And crowdsourcing processes. So you can think of it as delegation. Right? So we have this project. Here's what we want to do. We have concrete goals. I've set expectations. I, as a supervisor, right? I want to recognize you when you finish it. I'm going to give you the resources you need to be successful. But I want to tell you how to do it. I don't want to micromanage you. If I micromanage you, I'm going to inhibit innovation. Right? That's why you hire people like you hire. I want to allow you to have some deviation from what's expected. And I hope that's a positive deviation. Sometimes it's a negative. And for that, we want to put a floor, right? We want to minimize bad outcomes and certainly catastrophic losses. But I want to allow for positive deviations, right? So when you practice yield, there's greater buy-in from the people in the group because now they own the project. Instead of me telling you how to do it, me the supervisor, you guys own it. Figure it out. You're smart. You work at Google. You're super smart. Here's the thing we're trying to do. Make it gorgeous. Make it beautiful. Here's what you need to finish. Here's the deadline. Go do it. So again, very engaging. A lot of organizations want to micromanage because they want to minimize mistakes. So we've actually worked recently with hospitals that will practice yield, right? If you're trained, but training's really key here. So I say train carefully and delegate generously. So I want to really carefully train you, like in a hospital, and then I actually want my surgeon to be smart, right? Don't just be a robot, right? If you see something more unusual, do a deviation. Change that procedure if it's going to be a benefit to the patient. Or if it could save time for the organization, or if it's improve outcomes, right? So we want to allow that kind of deviation. But you have to allow for mistakes. So one way to do this is, I don't know if you do this here, but you could celebrate mistakes. You could have a, yay, we screwed up celebration or ovation, right? Unless you are willing to accept that people are going to make mistakes, which is how you get innovation, right? So I think even though we often say, like we tell kids, oh, everyone learns their mistakes, honey, it's okay. Sometimes at work we say that, but we don't really do it. So think about some crazy ways to celebrate the big fails. If you're going to get big wins, you're going to get some big fails. And again, you want to pull the plug on those big fails, not have catastrophic errors, not have, we don't want anybody to die. But besides that, yeah, we wasted a bunch of time and we learned a bunch. This is not how we do it. That's valuable learning, right? So celebrate that. Next up is what I call transfer. This is sort of like yield on steroids. So this is a role in which instead of saying, I'm going to assign work to Simon's group, I want to ask what group would like to do this project. So this is really enabling self-management. I should say as an aside, I have a picture here of Peter Drucker, who's my colleague, late colleague at Claremont for 10 years. And the last article Peter wrote for the Harvard Business Review was called Managing Oneself. And in that article, he basically argued in the mid-90s that we are all our own brands. Right? If you're your own brand, why am I assigning work to you? Why don't I allow you to manage yourself? So if you can do this, you can cut out layers of management. Again, I think Google's got a very flat organization. It works quite well. Many organizations do not. We worked with a company in the Central Valley called Morningstar Tomato, which is one of the best run companies you've never heard of, is the largest producer of tomato products, stewed tomatoes, steamed tomato, tomato paste in the US, about half the US market, because they're extraordinarily efficient. About 1,500 employees, there are no job titles. And 80% of these are seasonal, by the way. So you're hired for the picking processing season. How can you get away with no job titles? You have to write essentially a value proposition every year. I want to join Barbara's group. Here's how I'm going to create value. Okay. So Valve Software up in Seattle does this as well, right? You have desks on wheels. You join a group. You say, look, I want to work on your group. You guys are doing cool stuff, and I have these skills. I think I can contribute. And they say, maybe. Okay, show up. We'll see if you're useful, right? So just allow people to self-manage, and then you can have sort of ultimate buy-in. Now you own the project. Now it's really yours. Okay. So again, in some sense, this is a key sign of trust, right? Instead of me now saying, hey, we got this project coming in, you do it, I'm actually allowing you to choose when you do it, right? So in my own, so I run a 30-person lab, so that's my little, laboratory to try all this out. Sometimes what we find is that people don't want to be what we call primaries on projects. They don't want to pick up and run that project. So sometimes I have to say, hey, Eric, it's time, right? You've been here a year, you're trained, I think you should be primary in this project. Right? And we'll build a team around you. We'll give you the resources. We'll make sure you're successful. And I, as a supervisor, need to do constant feedback loops. So the supervisor's role is to do constant feedback. The slowest you want to do that is once a week. After a week, from the brain's perspective, it's like it's forever, never happened. Right? So constant feedback. How's your project going? Let's do a Monday morning huddle. Do you have the resources you need? Are you hitting your milestones? What's going right? What's going wrong? What do you need for me to be successful? Right? If I'm in that role, this kind of coaching role as supervisor, then my job is to make you look good, and when you look good, I look good. Right? So, but you've got buy-in because you own this project. You bid for this project. You love this project. So there's lots of literature in psychology, almost called locus of control, improves engagement, but also things like health, happiness. Okay, next component I call openness. This is a way to reduce the amount of stress that inhibits trust. So if I'm thinking the guys upstairs are, I don't know, doing stuff I don't know about. They're going to sell off my division. They're going to move Google to Costa Rica. If I have that kind of stress, I'm not focused on task. Right? I'm not focused on meeting this challenge that I need to meet. So why not just open everything up? So I know you have a fairly transparent culture here. There are lots of companies that have gone to kind of radical transparency where salaries are public, performance data is public. Everybody knows. It's scary. So I tried it in my lab. So we do project-based work. On that project base, people have hourly wages, and it's not so hard to do some multiplication and find out what my annual salary is. So I finally just put it out there. Here's what I do. The stuff you guys don't see. I got to travel, go to Google. It's terrible. I got to go to these places. So I don't see my little kids at home, right? So this is why, and I've years and years of doing this. This is why I get this salary. So it allows us to have that discussion. Eric's been doing this for 7 years. He has a different salary. He has less experience. He's doing a different set of jobs. He doesn't have to travel, right? So it actually opens up that really interesting conversation. And pretty much everybody knew what salaries were anyway. So, in the world we live in now, everything is more or less transparent. So I think there's a real opportunity to be completely transparent about what you're doing and say, look, we trust you guys. So, for example, Whole Foods says this. They send out quarterly profit and loss statements to all the employees. They give them classes on how to read them. So you know how your store's doing, how the division you work in is doing. They really empower division managers to choose what they want to stock, choose what suppliers they use. And so each department within Whole Foods is essentially a little autonomous unit. Now you got to hold together, and your store's got to, be cash positive most of the time, or else, you're out of business, and that's a bad thing for everybody, right? But you're going to run that as your own little unit. We're going to give you lots of control, and then give you feedback on how you're doing, and revenues feedback. Right? There are lots of other feedbacks as well. Who was it recently? A CEO who posted. I guess McKinsey does this, where all the senior people actually just post their 360s, so everyone can see them. So you have to do 360s? You want to see mine? Yeah, let's put them up there. Do I have shortcomings? Sure, I'm a human. So a lot of this really is taking kind of a very humble view. I think sometimes when you're a supervisor, when you're a founder, when you're a senior person, there's a sense that, gosh, I have to be, omniscient about everything because I'm the boss and I have to know everything. I think this approach is very humble. It says, look, these volunteer employees who are here, they're here because they want to help the organization. Just ask for help. And being transparent is a great way to do that. Just ask for help rather than demand it. C is for caring. So as you saw in that video, oxytocin facilitates appropriate social behaviors by increasing our sense of empathy. Right? So when I have an understanding of how people around me feel, I'm a much more effective social creature. Again, sometimes at work we think we should shut that off. Right? But Simon's a great guy. I want to be friends with him. We work together, that's cool, I can still be friends with him. Right? So why not just address that? That's the natural thing for human beings to do. When you work together, you're going to be friends with a bunch of those people. It's okay, you can be friends with them. Right? So an easy way to build those social relationships is to just articulate the emotion you see. So I come into work and I see Barbara and I say, instead of saying, hi Barbara, how are you? I'm fine, how are you? Go to my desk. I say, hi, you look happy, sad, worried. Then we can have a much deeper conversation. She say, oh, I am feeling kind of tired. Now I say, well, can I help you? Oh, well, my kids have been sick, my dog died, or whatever. Now we have a much better conversation because I've actually articulated the emotion I see in her. And it's an easy way to build this caring relationship. Yeah, I do care about you. If I didn't, why are you showing up since you're a volunteer? Okay. So it also means that you have to allow your emotions to show. Okay? Son of an engineer, not always the easiest thing. I'm with you guys. But if you allow those emotions to show, then people will also respond better to you. So part of this is really having the confidence, having the trust of the people around you that I can actually share with how I'm feeling. So if I walk into work and Barbara says, hey, gosh, you look like you're having a great day. And I say, oh, whatever. Have we had a good relationship? No. So here's a concrete example. Woman in my lab a year ago walks in. She is walking on air. I've known her for 5 years, graduate student. I said, oh, her name's Beth. Beth, what happened? I said, did you fall in love? Like you would look great. You're so happy. She said, I started running 3 months ago. I've lost 15 pounds. I'm going to do my first triathlon in 2 weeks. I've never felt better in my life. Thank you for recognizing this. Now, she has told me how many times since then how important that was to her, that I actually just recognized her as a human being, not as a human resource. Right? Yeah, you work in the lab and you're kind of a slave because you're a graduate student, but I recognize that you're a full human being. You have a life outside of work. You have emotions. You have feelings, and that's great. And I should embrace all those if I want to be an effective organization. All right, 2 more. I is for invest. So it's very important for the humans to have a sense of growth. So if you're using the system I've talked about so far, then you may have had the insight that the annual performance review is out the window. Don't need it. So we worked with a consulting company in the Midwest that was going through some crises, and they started using the system, got rid of the annual report. At the town hall, and the CEO mentioned this, people erupted in applause. Everyone hates it. Supervisors hate it, employees hate it. So I know you guys do much more rapid performance reviews. So if I'm giving you feedback at least once a week, clear goals, celebrating when you get wins, helping you out, even celebrating the losses when it goes bad. Hey, went bad. Awesome. We learned some stuff. We're not going to do that again. Right? So if I'm doing that, then this delayed look back at the last year or more of what you did, it's useless. And again, from a brain perspective, doesn't matter. So we created what we call the whole person review, which is forward-looking. And because I'm interested in you as a human being, not as a human resource, that has three components. One is professional growth. I want to make sure that you're growing professionally. So a key question there would be, am I helping you get your next job? Let's have that discussion. Maybe your next job's here at Google, right? Maybe your next job is somewhere else. You want to start your own company. Let's have that discussion, right? So maybe you want to spend, I don't know, a year working in marketing so you can see how that works, right? If that's what you really dig and it's going to be so engaging for you, yeah, let's try to make that happen. Okay, so one is professional growth. Or what training do you need? Or do you need to go to a conference? Are you not networking the right way? Let's help you facilitate that because I want to have that relationship with you. So at lunch we talked about Zooglers, right? So you have a network of people who were here, and there are a lot of them are pretty awesome, and they can be a resource. They're bringing work in at their own companies. They're somewhere else, or they come back. Someone else trained them in some other stuff, and now you can hire them back, and they're trained for free. How awesome is that? You didn't pay for it. So maintaining those networks is very important. So the second is personal growth. So is your family happy? Are your kids happy? Is this where you want to be? Do you feel like you're comfortable in your environment? Again, because I care about you as a human being, I want to build this trusting environment. Say, oh no, my spouse, she really wants to live in New York and blah, blah, blah. Well, let's have that discussion. As opposed to you coming in my office, pulling your hair out going, my wife's going to leave me unless we move back east. Let's have that discussion in advance. Where do you see your family going? Are you getting a good work-life integration? Not balance, because there's no balance. There's an integration, right? You want to work at home twice a week? Okay, let's try to make that happen. For my student Beth, when I did this review with her, what she wanted was, I want to come into work twice a week at 10 o'clock instead of 8 so I can run in the morning. Boom, let's have someone else cover the lab from 8 to 10. Tuesday, can we do that? Sure, because that's important to you. And I'm invested in you as a human being. I've got to make sure it's important for you. Okay, and the third leg of this whole person review is what I call spiritual growth. And that can mean whatever it means for people that you talk to. It's not professional, it's not your family, whatever else you care about. What do you care about? So it could be, I need time to meditate. I want to take a class. I want to volunteer at my kid's school twice a week. I'd like to get involved in, I want to start to take up rock climbing. So I want to be able to work half days on Fridays so I can take this rock climbing class. Let's try to make that happen, right? So I want to make sure that you have this sense of growth. When you have a sense of growth, then what happens? You're satisfied, right? You feel like this is a place for me. This is a place I can spend my whole career. It's valuable to me. Okay. Last component is natural. So as I said earlier, sometimes, particularly as supervisors, we think we have to know everything. And it's really beautiful to be imperfect. In fact, one of the key ways to initiate the release of oxytocin is just to ask for help. And you ask for help when you need help. So there's a finding in psychology called the pratfall effect. So if you stumble, people are much more willing to help you. You're seen as much more likable. So a classic example of this was right after the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s. All went south bad, quickly. And so Kennedy goes on TV and he says, I approve this invasion of Cuba. I thought it was a good thing. The Soviets are involved, blah, blah, blah. We blew it. I blew it. I'm the president. The military advisors give me bad advice. And I want to be a better president. So I'm going to try to get better at this job. I've only been doing this for a year. And I want your support. And I want to be the best leader for the United States. His approval ratings went up after the Bay of Pigs because he owned the mistake. Now, it's important that you're seen as competent. If you're stumbling and you're seen as incompetent, then it just hurts you, right? But as long as you're competent, you can say, look, didn't work this one didn't work out. Wasn't so good. Okay, so what? We'll move on. I'm okay with that. So kind of live up to your mistakes, own your mistakes, allow yourself to be vulnerable. Southwest Airlines, which we all fly in California, you see it a lot, right? You see funny flight attendants. Herb Kelleher, who's the founder and CEO for many years, would toss the luggage with the luggage handler people, would hand out drinks on the planes, wear a funny monkey suit to work one day. It was about really just being himself, having fun. That's okay. And it's very appealing, and people loved him. Okay, so if we take all 8 of those factors, which again are not statistically independent, regress them on organizational trust, we explain 100% of the variation in trust. So there are no other classes of management factors we need to worry about. Right? So what we're trying to do is design this environment, measure, and intervene in a series of controlled experiments, and I'll talk about that in just a second, so that you're so engaged, and you're engaged not only internally but also externally. Right? If I love what I do at Google, I'm excited about it, and I see an end user, and I'm like, oh yeah, whatever, I work at Google. They're like, yeah, it's a really cool place to work, right? It's challenging, it's hard, these super crazy, brilliant people, and we're trying to solve big hunkin' problems every day. That's super engaging, right? As opposed to, whatever, they pay me, I show up, right? I don't want that guy. So I like what I call the 3 a.m. employee. Not all the time, but occasionally, I want to get an email from someone who works for me at 3 a.m. going, you know this problem that we worked on for like the last month and we couldn't solve? I found it. I woke up in the middle of the night, I got the solution. Right? I don't want that every day because then you're just a hyperactive, crazy person. But what I really want is you to be so engaged that you're doing stuff that I can't pay you for. You're doing it because you love it. You're doing it because it's super engaging for you. So that's the kind of environment I want to have. I want to create that 3 a.m. employee. So, an interesting outcome from the neuroscience is that the pathway for trust in the brain, this larger brain circuit that we've characterized as using oxytocin, overlaps strongly with a brain circuit that activates when we are helping or caring for other people. So besides Drucker, my other kind of management hero is Edwards Deming. And so Deming said, at its core, every organization's mission is to improve lives. So that's what I call the transcendent purpose of an organization. So if employees understand that transcendent purpose, the neuroscience suggests that there would be this synergistic effect. High trust plus high purpose will produce this great sense of joy, this happiness. I just love it here. Right? So in fact, we find that in the data, which I'll show you in a second. That picture is from Zappos.com. That's called Monkey Row, which is where Tony Hsieh and the CEOs are. Actually, that's their old office outside, now they're in downtown Las Vegas. That's the old office. But it looks crazy. It's weird. People decorate in a funny way, and they're having a great time. It's fun, right? When you really, what are they doing? They're selling shoes and clothes. But if you do it in a way that really makes people super happy, it's fun, it's engaging, it's funky, you can throw a Nerf ball around and have fun. Yeah, it's still a super fun job. It can be. So you could reverse engineer this process. So for the people ops, people dev people. If you don't have joy at work, then you might investigate some of these factors. So again, from the neuroscience we've done, which I'm glossing over, but I'm happy to share, and I have shared with Barbara some of the papers, does suggest that places you want to push on are we're not communicating this transcendent purpose very well, or our trust levels are low, or both. Right? So think of joy as a in statistic language, as a sufficient statistic for a well-functioning workplace. Right? If people are super happy at work, you're probably doing things pretty well. Okay, so here are outcome measures, and we'll take some questions. So if I look at the top quartile of people using this O-factor tool we developed to measure organizational trust, and compare that to the bottom quartile, we find less chronic stress, more energy, greater productivity. These are directly measured, not self-report, directly measured. We gave employees tasks to do and just measured with or without essentially a culture prime, how productive they were, more joy at work, a greater sense of purpose, that is kind of values alignment with the organization. I really love my organization's mission. Employee attention, much, much higher in high trust organizations. Greater job satisfaction. Innovation we measured with a task we use in experiments, field experiments, where people had to solve a difficult problem together in a group that they've never seen before. And we can measure how many steps they got through in solving this hard problem. So high trust employees work better together. They have these more efficient social bonds. They solve problems better. fewer sick days, and here's the last thing that was really exciting for me. Not only are people in high trust workplaces more productive, more innovative, healthier, they're more satisfied with their lives outside of work. Right? So when you create a great culture, you're also creating great parents, great citizens, and a great society. Right? That's really, to me, the triple bottom line. Good for the employee, good for the organization, good for the world. Okay, so we find this in, that's an old slide, by the way. I didn't know I had the Google slide in there. Isn't that appropriate? So we find this in, for example, the best companies to work for, the survey that Fortune's done for about 25 years. And recent analysis at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, showed that these best companies to work for, in fact, have much higher stock returns. So that great culture is, in some sense, a competitive advantage. It allows them to generate higher profits over a longer term. Right? So first of all, you're increasing productivity, but you're also reducing things like hiring costs. Right? So it costs about 20% of annual salary to hire somebody. So increase retention, assuming you're hiring the right people, then these people are not only more productive, but you don't have to hire as many. Churn is lower. Okay, so it looks like there's actually a real big payoff here. Okay, so here's the recipe. How do I use this? Here's the take-home punchline slide. Run controlled management experiments. Just like you run experiments on the software, on the interface, on the UX, just start out, clarify what objective you want to push on. I'm going to give you a concrete example in just a moment. Identify how you measure the change. How would I know if I'm moving toward that objective? Right? Then identify an experiment and tell the people in the group, we're going to try this experiment. We're going to intervene here, and we'll see what happens. Implement the innovation. If it works, stick with it. If it doesn't, go back to the status quo. Hey, we tried this, didn't work. Right? We thought it would be good. You guys didn't like it? We'll just go back to what we did before. No harm, no foul. And then do it again. Right? So this is kind of very much in a Deming world, kind of continuous improvement, little management experiments all the time. And I know you guys do this all the time anyway, but I'm trying to give you a theoretical structure underneath that. It's really about building a culture in which social relationships are kind of paramount. Right? They're really, really efficient. So I think of trust as a kind of social lubricant. When trust is high, it's easy to get things done because the frictions are lower. And it includes getting things done at work. It's just easier when I trust people. So I want to thoughtfully design a culture for high trust because I want to reduce those frictions at work. So here's an example. We worked with a largish insurance company whose name you would know. And they had retention problems. And their retention problems were in a particular division. And so it's okay, let's work on that division. So your problem is high turnover. And so when we did the O-Factor survey, we found that the invest number of those 8 factors, invest was really low. And you talk to the employees and they say, you know what, I got hired here out of college, I'm working in this division, there's no career ladder, no one's really mentoring me, it's a burnout kind of job, entry level, I just leave. I said, okay, let's put in programs so that you have mentors, you have a clear career ladder, you have a career coach. Let's hire some people who are senior and their job is to coach you. Where are you going? What do you like? Which division would you like to move to? How do I help you get your next job within this company? Right? So really, really effective. Communicate clearly the change, implement the change, and in this company, retention went way up. Right? People said, oh yeah, now I get it. I'm starting here on the phones, not super fun, but if I do well here, I'm learning this business from the ground up and I'll move on. Right? So super clear on what we're doing. Okay, time for questions or comments. I know I spoke super fast and didn't take any breaths, and that's just the way I am, but I'd be happy to take questions. Do we need to use the mic, sir? We do need to use the mic. So thank you for listening, and I'm hoping to be of service to all my friends at Google. My 4th trip, so super happy to be here, you guys. Thank you so much, and thank you to Barb Usher, who brought me in, and Simon, who arranged my visit.
All right, let's give Paul a round of applause.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
All right, so at this time, we'll take some questions from the audience.
I have a question about oxytocin.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering how much the baseline levels differ between individuals generally, and if they are drastically lower in people who are like psychopaths or maybe suffer from forms of autism or...
Great question. And so the backstory in this, what started out as basic science research did spawn a lot of clinical trials for things like autism, schizophrenia, social anxiety, depression. We work with psychopaths in prisons. So oxytocin, like many other chemicals in the body, is reused. So it functions outside the brain to facilitate uterine contractions during birth, milk letdown for breastfeeding. But in the brain, it functions much more like a neurotransmitter, that is sort of acute responses. And so the sort of secret on why it really hadn't been studied outside of reproduction is no one figured out a way to actually measure that acute brain response, and we did. And once we had this tool, then you can go to town and ask a lot of questions with that tool. And this was based on animal research. So I took the animal research, turned it into human research, which is not always trivial, but once we had that, it worked. So what we found is that everybody makes oxytocin, they just don't always make it at the right times. So if you're having a really bad day, high levels of stress, you inhibit oxytocin release. If you had a very adverse childhood, abuse, neglect, history, then the brain regions that should have many oxytocin receptors atrophy, and then you don't get this kind of feel-good effect that we get when we interact with people in a nice way. In the psychopathic study, this is research coming out soon in a journal, we found that all those guys make oxytocin. So it's not the chronic level, it's this acute response. And that's the trick. They don't get the acute response in the right way, and in fact, they make lots of oxytocin because their receptors are dysfunctional. And what do they lack primarily? Psychopaths lack empathy, and that's exactly what oxytocin increases in us. So oxytocin is kind of a innate moral compass. I'm getting feedback when I interact with the humans based on their body language, the way they treat me, their expressions, on whether my behavior was appropriate. And once you've been on the planet for more than about 20 years, you've sort of figured out that, I could get Eric to help me with my project by beating the crap out of him, or I could treat him really nice. Eric, you're super smart, man. Do you have time? Do you have like half an hour you can help me with this? That's a much better approach, right? So anyway, it doesn't take, a genius to figure that out, but the hard part is showing, taking this, quote, reproductive hormone, as one of my colleagues said, this female hormone is showing that we all release it, and in the right circumstances, it guides us to the appropriate social behavior. So yeah, great science question. Thank you.
Okay, there's another question on the Dory.
Yes.
Do some people need these factors more than others? It seems that some people function better in workplaces without many of these features than other people do. If so, do you have any thoughts about the differences?
Yeah, it's a great question. This kind of reminds me of your former colleague, Marissa Mayer at Yahoo, having everybody come into work. So yeah, what if I'm kind of a loner and I just like to be by myself and I don't need the humans so much? I think, to an extent Marissa was right? We do want to have these collisions in which I'm just bumping into people. From my time here today, I understand that you guys create teams, very rapidly and reform teams very rapidly. So it's difficult to trust someone that I don't know much about. Even though they work here, they have to be kind of okay because they work here. How do I know that? How do I build trust rapidly? So that's what I want to talk about. And one way is to use these factors in the micro scale, right? So I can actually tell the people in my group something vulnerable about myself, something embarrassing, something difficult. So I have students do this in class. So tell me something really weird about yourself so I can remember it. First, I'll remember you better, but something that's not super flattering, right? Something unusual. So you can start with that. Just start small. Before we talk about work, let's just talk about us, right? We're going to have to work together for the next 2 months on this project. How are we going to do that? Right? I know 2 people here and the other 7 I don't know. How do we do that? First of all, you keep teams small. So we had I was talking to folks in People Dev this morning, and average team size, they said, is 9 people here. So that's good. So single digit teams, much better than super large teams. So we can actually have that personal interaction. I know your name, I know something about you. And you've got to actually share a little bit outside just, I'm I'm a Ruby on Rails programmer, and that's my goal in life or I work in Go or whatever. Right? I actually know something more about you. So do you have a dog? Do you have kids? Do you have a wife? Like we do this at meetings, right? Or do you know someone I know? Oh yeah, I know Simon. Okay, so do a little bit of sharing, right? It's actually not wasted time. Just like the 10-minute pre-meeting meditation is not a waste of time, right? Get focused. In that case, it's focusing on being present. I think the trust work is really focusing on others. It's not focusing so much on me. Let's just focus on who you are. What do you want to get out of this? What are your real goals? What drives you crazy here? What makes you super happy? Right? If we could do that in 10 minutes, right? Tell me one thing that's really unusual that you love about Google, and tell me one thing that drives you nuts here. You guys all know that. You don't have to share it now, but you all know it, right? So let me know about you, because you're a human, not a human resource. So I think just changing that language is a start. Are there personality differences? For sure. And we see in experiments, there are about 5% of the population who are super responders. They increase oxytocin levels with a social stimulus, 5 standard deviations above the mean. And they're super empathic, super warm. Those people are always great. They have tons of friends. Everything works for them. What I think you want to do is bring in the people who struggle a little bit, who maybe are more introverted, who don't like to leave their office as much. Say, let's go down to the cafeteria. Let's grab a coffee or grab a beer after work. Spend a little bit of investment and get to know that person. I think it's not that hard. And my prescription as Dr. Love is, of course, 8 hugs a day. So it's okay. You can hug people at work. You won't get sued. No creepy hugs, right? Just say, look, I hug everybody in my group. I saw a lot of people hugging today, right? It's appropriate. That's what the humans do. You can build that relationship. Or go play some volleyball or play some ping pong, right? Get to know that person just a little bit. You'd be surprised. And also, I have to say, also celebrate the difficult people, right? So there are difficult people here. There are difficult people everywhere. See them as an opportunity for you to practice compassion, for you to really show you trust someone who's hard to trust, who just isn't as open. That's a great way to stretch yourself, since we're all interested in investment and growing a little bit. Gives you a chance to grow.
We're out of time.
We're out of time. Gosh.
But I wanted to thank Paul once again for coming here and speaking.
Thank you for listening.